The gas station was eerily quiet that night. Luke pulled up in his old pickup truck, the engine rumbling as he parked by the pump. The bright neon lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly in the stillness. He had been driving for hours, tired but unwilling to stop for long. The highway stretched endlessly behind him, and he just wanted to get home. As he stepped out of his truck, he noticed a figure near one of the farthest pumps. The person was bent over, struggling with something in the shadows. Their vehicle looked strange, sleek, metallic, and entirely out of place for the small roadside gas station. Luke frowned, his curiosity piqued. "Hey, you need help," he called out. The figure froze, then slowly turned to face him. A hood covered most of their head, but as they stepped closer into the light, Luke's breath caught. It wasn't just the strange car. The person, no, the woman, wasn't human. Her skin had a faint shimmer, almost like starlight, and her eyes glowed softly, a deep violet that seemed to pierce right through him. She hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then she spoke, her voice low and urgent. "I need help, please." Luke blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. "Help? What kind of help?" She gestured toward her vehicle, which he now realized wasn't a car at all. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, with smooth curves and faintly glowing lines that pulsed along its sides. "It won't start. I'm trying to leave, but..." She glanced nervously over her shoulder, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're coming." "They?" Luke asked, his confusion deepening. She opened her mouth to explain, but headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the dark. Her violet eyes widened in fear. "It's them." Luke didn't know who they were, but he could see the panic on her face. Instinctively, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but if you need a ride, my truck's right there." For a moment, she stared at him, her glowing eyes searching his face, as if trying to read his intentions. Then she nodded quickly. "Thank you, but hurry." Without waiting, Luke led her to his truck. As they climbed in, the distant headlights grew brighter, and a black SUV roared into view, its engine growling like a predator. Luke's heart raced as he started his truck and slammed his foot on the gas. The old pickup groaned in protest but sped down the road, leaving the gas station and the strange car behind. In the passenger seat, the alien woman kept glancing back, her hands clutching the edge of the seat. "Who are you?" Luke asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "My name is Kalia," she said softly. "And you just saved my life." The headlights of the SUV loomed in the rearview mirror. Luke gripped the wheel tighter. He didn't know what he had just gotten himself into, but there was no turning back now. Luke's old truck groaned as it sped down the narrow highway. The black SUV behind them was gaining fast, its powerful engine roaring like an animal on the hunt. The headlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows over the trees that lined the road. "Who are they?" Luke asked, keeping his eyes on the road as his hands gripped the wheel tightly. Kalia, sitting tensely in the passenger seat, glanced back at the pursuing vehicle. Her glowing violet eyes flickered with fear. "They're called the Verax, a dangerous group. If they catch me, they'll kill me. And anyone who's helped me." Luke's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure how his quiet drive had turned into a life-or-death escape, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Great, so now they want me dead too." Kalia gave him a quick, apologetic look. "I didn't mean to drag you into this." "Yeah, well, it's a little late for that," Luke muttered, his mind racing. The highway ahead was empty, no sign of other cars or help in sight. He needed a plan, and fast. Behind them, the SUV's engine growled louder. It was closing the distance, its sleek, black design more like a predator than a vehicle. Luke swerved onto a side road, hoping to lose them in the winding forest paths. Kalia's hands clutched the edge of her seat as the truck bounced over the uneven road. "This vehicle, it's so primitive," she said, her voice tight with tension. Luke shot her a dry look. "Sorry it's not a spaceship." She almost smiled but quickly focused again as the SUV followed them onto the dirt road, its tires spitting gravel. "Turn here," Kalia shouted suddenly, pointing to a narrow path that veered into the woods. Luke yanked the wheel, the truck skidding slightly as it tore down the overgrown path. The dense trees closed in around them, branches scraping against the sides of the vehicle. The SUV hesitated at the entrance to the path, then roared after them, its larger size struggling to maneuver in the tight space. "They're not stopping," Luke said through gritted teeth. Kalia reached into her cloak and pulled out a small metallic device. It was round, no larger than a baseball, and emitted a faint blue glow. "This should slow them down," she said, pressing a button on the side. "What is that?" Luke asked, glancing at her. "Just keep driving," she replied. She rolled down the window, leaned out slightly, and threw the device onto the ground behind them. A second later, a blinding flash of light erupted, followed by a high-pitched sound that made Luke wince. The SUV screeched to a halt as its lights and engine died simultaneously, leaving it stranded in the middle of the forest. Kalia sighed with relief, sinking back into her seat. "That should buy us some time." Luke exhaled, his grip on the wheel loosening slightly. "You've got a lot of explaining to do." Kalia nodded, her glowing eyes meeting his. "I know. But first, we need to find somewhere safe." Luke nodded and drove deeper into the woods, the tension in the air thick as the weight of the unknown pressed down on them. Luke's truck came to a stop deep in the forest, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to swallow the moonlight. He killed the engine, and silence enveloped them, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Kalia sat in the passenger seat, her glowing violet eyes scanning the darkness outside. She seemed tense, her shimmering skin catching the faint light through the window. Luke turned to her, his expression a mixture of frustration and curiosity. "All right, start talking," he said, leaning back against the worn seat. "Who are these Verax people, and why are they after you?" Kalia hesitated, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but tinged with guilt. "The Verax Syndicate is one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the galaxy. They control planets, trade in weapons, and enslave entire civilizations. I worked for them, once." Luke raised an eyebrow. "You worked for them?" "I didn't have a choice," Kalia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was a scientist on my home planet, developing advanced energy systems. The Verax found out about my work and forced me to join them. They used my research to create a powerful energy source they now use to dominate other worlds." Luke frowned, trying to process her words. "And now you're running from them because—" Kalia's glowing eyes met his, filled with a mix of shame and determination. "Because I destroyed their prototype and stole the plans. It was the only way to stop them. Without it, they can't build more of those weapons. But now they want revenge, and they won't stop until they find me." Luke let out a low whistle, leaning forward slightly. "So you're some kind of alien fugitive?" Kalia nodded. "I didn't mean to end up on Earth. My ship was damaged during the escape, and I crash-landed here. I thought I could stay hidden, but the Verax tracked me down faster than I expected." Luke shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around the situation. "You could have picked a better hiding spot than a gas station," he muttered. Kalia almost smiled. "I wasn't expecting to meet someone like you." Luke snorted, the corner of his mouth twitching into a faint grin. "Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting to help an alien escape a galactic mafia." The moment of levity was short-lived. Kalia glanced nervously at the forest around them. "We can't stay here for long. The Verax will search for us." Luke nodded, his practical side taking over. "All right. If you want to stay hidden, You'll need more than that gadget you threw back there. I know someone who might be able to help." Kalia tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her glowing eyes. "Who?" "A friend. Sarah. She's good with tech," Luke said, starting the engine again. "She might not believe you're from another planet, but she'll believe me." As the truck rumbled to life, Kalia gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Luke. I don't deserve your help, but I'm glad you're giving it." Luke shrugged, his hands gripping the wheel. "Guess I've always had a thing for underdogs. Let's just hope your Verax friends don't catch up first." The truck rolled deeper into the forest, the weight of Kalia's secret pressing down on them both. The small garage sat on the outskirts of town, hidden behind rows of old houses. Luke's truck rattled to a stop, and he killed the engine. The faint glow of a workbench light spilled out from the garage window, where Sarah, a sharp and no-nonsense engineer, spent most of her nights tinkering with broken machines. Kalia hesitated, her glowing violet eyes scanning the area nervously. "Are you sure she can be trusted?" she asked, her voice soft but uncertain. Luke nodded. "Sarah's good people. She won't turn you in, and if anyone can help with your tech, it's her." He stepped out of the truck and motioned for Kalia to follow. She pulled her hood up, hiding her shimmering skin, and climbed out reluctantly. Together, they walked to the garage door, the night air crisp and quiet. Luke knocked twice, then pushed the door open. Inside, Sarah was hunched over a half-dismantled drone, her red hair tied back and safety goggles perched on her nose. She glanced up, her green eyes narrowing in suspicion. "You're late, Luke." "What's?" Her voice trailed off as she noticed Kalia. Sarah froze, her gaze flicking between Luke and the hooded figure. "Who's this?" "It's complicated," Luke admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sarah, meet Kalia. She's not from around here." Kalia hesitated before pulling her hood back, revealing her glowing eyes and faintly shimmering skin. Sarah's jaw dropped, and she took a step back. "What the hell, Luke? Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," Luke said quickly. "Kalia's an alien. She's in trouble, and we need your help." Sarah stared at Kalia, then crossed her arms. "This better be good. Start talking." Kalia nodded, her voice calm but urgent. "I'm being hunted by a dangerous group called the Verax Syndicate. They're after me because I stole something that could stop them from conquering more worlds. My ship is damaged, and I'm stranded here. I need to fix my equipment to stay hidden." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And you brought her here. Do you know what kind of heat this could bring down on us?" "I didn't have much of a choice," Luke said, his tone defensive. "She's got these guys after her, and they're not exactly friendly." Kalia stepped forward, her glowing eyes earnest. "I know this puts you at risk, but I promise I'll leave as soon as I can. I just need to repair my cloaking device." Sarah studied Kalia for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, let me see it." Kalia pulled out the small metallic device from her cloak and handed it to Sarah. The engineer's expression shifted from suspicion to fascination as she examined it. This is incredible. Way beyond anything we got here. Can you fix it?" Kalia asked. Sarah smirked. "Give me some time, and I'll make it better than new." Luke exhaled in relief. "Thanks, Sarah. I owe you." "Big time," Sarah said, already lost in the device. "Now let's hope your alien friends don't show up before I'm done." Kalia glanced out the window, her expression wary. "We should be ready for anything. They'll find us eventually." The three of them exchanged uneasy looks. For now, they had a plan, but time was running out. The garage buzzed with quiet activity as Sarah worked tirelessly on Kalia's cloaking device. Tools clinked against metal, and faint sparks lit the dimly lit space as she soldered tiny circuits. Luke sat nearby, his arms crossed, keeping a wary eye on the door. Kalia stood by the window, her glowing violet eyes scanning the dark street outside. The tension in the air was thick. They all knew the Verax wouldn't give up easily. "How long will it take?" Luke asked, breaking the silence. Sarah didn't look up, her hand steady as she connected delicate wires. "This tech is leagues ahead of anything I've seen. Fixing it is one thing. Understanding it is another. I need at least another hour." Kalia's gaze flicked to the clock on the wall, her expression grim. "We might not have that long." As if on cue, the sound of distant engines shattered the quiet. Kalia stiffened, her shimmering skin seeming to ripple with unease. "They're here," she whispered. Luke jumped to his feet, grabbing the nearest tool, a wrench, and moving to the door. "Sarah, how fast can you finish?" Sarah's hands didn't falter, but her voice was tense. "Not fast enough if they come crashing in here." Kalia turned to Luke, her voice urgent. "We need to buy her time." Luke nodded, his mind racing. He opened the door a crack and peeked outside. The glow of headlights illuminated the street as two black SUVs came into view, their engines growling like predators on the hunt. "They'll search the whole area," Kalia said. "We can't let them get close." Luke stepped back and looked at her. "Got anything in that bag of tricks of yours?" Kalia reached into her cloak and pulled out another small metallic device, this one shaped like a disc with faint glowing lines. "This can create a temporary decoy signal. It might lead them away, but it's risky." "Do it," Luke said without hesitation. Kalia pressed a button on the disc, and it emitted a low hum before she threw it out the window. It landed in a nearby alley, the glow intensifying as it began to pulse with energy. The SUVs stopped abruptly, their headlights sweeping across the area. The Verax agents emerged, tall figures in dark uniforms, scanning the surroundings with advanced equipment. One of them pointed toward the alley, and the group moved in that direction. "It's working," Kalia said, her voice barely audible. "Not for long," Luke muttered, gripping the wrench tightly. "They'll figure out it's fake soon enough." Sarah suddenly called out, her voice filled with determination. "I'm done." Kalia rushed to her side as Sarah held up the repaired device. "It should work now, but I had to make some adjustments. It'll hide you better, but you can't turn it on for too long at once." Kalia nodded, gratitude in her glowing eyes. "Thank you." The sound of shouting came from outside as the Verax agents realized the decoy was a trap. "Time's up," Luke said. "We need to go. Now." Kalia activated the cloaking device, her shimmering form flickering before fading entirely from view. Luke and Sarah exchanged a brief look before grabbing what they could and heading for the back exit. The night wasn't over yet, and the Verax were closer than ever. The cool night air bit at their skin as they slipped through the back exit of Sarah's garage, moving as quietly as possible. Luke led the way, keeping his eyes trained on the shadows, his senses on high alert. Behind him, Kalia moved without a sound, her cloaking device making her invisible. Sarah followed close behind, glancing nervously at every corner they passed. "Where are we going?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "We need to find Goran," Luke said, his expression serious. "He's the only one who might know how to get us out of this mess. He's been hiding here on Earth for years." Sarah frowned. "And he's going to help us. You're sure about this?" Luke nodded. "He owes me. Goran's been living off the grid. No one knows where he is, but I know where to find him." Kalia's voice came from just behind him, her tone cautious. "I'm not so sure we have time for this. If the Verax are already close, we'll be risking a lot more than we can afford." Luke turned to her, his gaze steady. "We need more than just that cloaking device if we're going to survive. Goran can help us come up with a real plan. He's seen things that could make all the difference." They moved through the dark streets of the small town, avoiding the main roads where they might be spotted. Luke led them to a worn-down building on the edge of town, hidden behind overgrown shrubs and tall fences. The place looked abandoned, but Luke knew better. It was the perfect hideout. He knocked 3 times on the door, a rhythmic tap that had become a secret signal over the years. The door creaked open slightly, and a pair of intense green eyes peered out from the darkness. "You're late," a gruff voice said. Luke smirked. "Sorry. Had a bit of a detour." The man standing in the doorway stepped back, letting them in. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with wild black hair and a scar that ran down the side of his face. His clothes were simple, worn, but practical. It was clear he had been living off the grid for a long time. This was Goran, Luke's old friend, and despite his rough exterior, a valuable ally. "Goran, this is Kalia," Luke said, motioning to the cloaked figure beside him. "We need your help." Goran's eyes shifted to Kalia, and for a moment he said nothing. His gaze was cold, calculating, like he was deciding whether or not to trust her. Finally, he grunted and stepped aside, allowing them to enter. "Fine," he said, his voice low. "Come inside. We'll talk." Once inside, Goran led them to a room that looked more like a workshop than a living space. Maps, tools, and strange devices were scattered across the walls and floor. It was clear that Goran was more than just a survivalist. He had a sharp mind and an extensive knowledge of tech and strategy. "All right, Luke, you've got 1 hour," Goran said, sitting down at a workbench. "Explain what's going on." Luke quickly explained the situation, detailing how Kalia had stolen valuable research from the Verax Syndicate and how the Verax were now hunting her down. Goran listened intently, his fingers tapping on the table as he absorbed the information. "Sounds like a hell of a mess," Goran muttered when Luke finished. He glanced over at Kalia, who remained silent, her violet eyes downcast. "I don't know why I'm helping you, but I guess we're in this together now." Kalia met his gaze and nodded. "I didn't ask for this, but I won't stop fighting." Goran nodded, his face hardening. "Good. We'll need that fire if we're going to make it out alive." Luke let out a breath, feeling a small sense of hope. For the first time in a while, things seemed to be moving in the right direction. But deep down, he knew the Verax wouldn't give up easily. The real fight was just beginning. The dim light in Goran's hideout flickered as Kalia carefully examined the strange map he had spread out across the table. The map was a mix of human and alien technology, filled with symbols and coordinates she didn't fully understand, but it was a start. Luke leaned over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the map. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice low. He wasn't one for long conversations, but the urgency of their situation made it impossible to stay silent for long. Goran, who had been sitting in the corner with his arms crossed, finally spoke. "We need to create a safe place for Kalia. That cloaking device of hers is good, but it won't keep her hidden forever. We need to get her to a place where the Verax can't find her." "And how do we do that?" Luke asked, glancing between Goran and Kalia. Goran tapped a finger on the map. "There's a location I know of. It's isolated, deep in the mountains, away from any signals the Verax could track. But it's not going to be easy to get there. We'll have to move fast." Kalia looked at the map, her violet eyes narrowing in thought. "I've heard of places like this, but I don't have the resources to hide for long. We need something more. A shield, a way to block their sensors completely." Goran's gaze met hers, sharp and calculating. "I've got something that might help, but it's risky. If we can tap into Earth's natural resources, maybe we can create a false signature that will fool their tracking systems. We'll need a generator, and we'll need to modify it to work with your tech." "Okay," Kalia said slowly, "but can we really make that work? Earth's technology isn't advanced enough for them to detect." Goran interrupted. "But with the right adjustments, it can be made to look like something else. Something harmless, like a regular power station." Luke folded his arms. "And you can make that happen." Goran smirked, a rare sight. "I don't need alien tech to work magic. I just need time and the right materials." Kalia turned to Luke, her expression serious. "This could work, but we'll need to get to that generator before they find us. and I don't know how much time we have left." Luke's mind raced. The plan sounded crazy, but it was their best shot. He knew Goran was the kind of guy who could make the impossible happen, but it still felt like a huge gamble. "How long?" "2 days," Goran said without hesitation. "We'll need to move quickly, but it's possible." Kalia took a deep breath, weighing the risk. "We don't have a choice. We do this, or we run until they catch us." Luke nodded, determination filling him. "Then let's get to work." They spent the rest of the night preparing, gathering supplies, and planning their route. Luke's mind never stopped working, and the weight of what was coming settled heavily on his shoulders. The Verax wouldn't stop until they had Kalia, and he knew it. But for the first time, he wasn't alone in this fight. By dawn, they were ready to move. They slipped out of Goran's hideout, their footsteps silent as they headed for the mountains, where Earth's natural resources might give them the edge they needed. As they moved into the wilderness, Luke couldn't help but feel the gravity of their situation. The Verax were coming, and soon they would be in a race against time. But for now, all he could do was trust that Earth's ingenuity, and the people he had found along the way, would be enough to help them survive. The early morning air was crisp as Luke, Kalia, and Goran trekked through the dense forest, the path narrow and rough beneath their feet. The plan was set. They had 2 days to reach the generator in the mountains, modify it, and use it to shield Kalia from the Verax's sensors. But as Luke walked ahead, his mind kept drifting back to the danger they were in. Every rustle of the leaves, every distant sound made his heart race. "Are you sure this is the right direction?" Kalia asked quietly, her voice just above a whisper. She stayed close behind Luke, still hidden under the cloaking device. Her glowing violet eyes flickered with uncertainty, but her confidence in Luke remained strong. Luke glanced back at her. "We're heading toward the old power station. If we can modify the generator there, it'll give us the cover we need." "Goran's sure about this." Kalia nodded but didn't say anything more. Her mind was elsewhere, thinking of the Verax and the danger they were still facing. They were a galaxy-spanning organization, relentless and powerful. The fact that they were hunting her made her feel like a target in the vast emptiness of space, and with every step they took, she felt the pressure of time closing in on them. As they moved deeper into the woods, the peacefulness of the forest gave Luke a false sense of calm. It didn't last long. Suddenly, the sound of engines pierced the quiet. A low rumble in the distance, too close, too fast. Luke's stomach dropped. The Verax had found them. "Get down," Luke hissed, signaling for Kalia and Goran to duck behind a cluster of large trees. Kalia quickly activated her cloaking device, disappearing from sight. Luke and Goran crouched low, their breaths shallow, listening to the approaching vehicles. The rumble of engines grew louder, and then the unmistakable roar of black SUVs came into view, cutting through the forest road like predators hunting their prey. "They're here," Goran muttered under his breath, his fingers tightening around the handle of his weapon. "And they're not alone." Luke's heart raced. The Verax had brought backup. They were closing in. Kalia's voice came through the comlink in Luke's ear, barely a whisper. "What do we do now?" Luke's mind raced. They couldn't outrun them, and there was no way to fight off the Verax with the odds stacked against them. Their best chance was to stay hidden and hope the forest would be enough of a shield until they could get to the generator. "We wait," Luke whispered, his eyes locked on the approaching vehicles. "Stay low. If they get too close, we'll have to move fast." Goran's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. They all stayed perfectly still, their bodies pressed against the cool earth. The sound of the SUVs grew louder, the vehicles skimming over the rough terrain. The Verax were searching, but they weren't sure where their targets were. Yet, Luke's pulse was deafening in his ears as he strained to hear any movement. His eyes darted to the trees, then to the vehicles, hoping they would pass by without noticing them. The SUVs came to a stop not far from where they were hidden. The engine's hum died down, and Luke held his breath. A Verax agent stepped out of the SUV, tall and imposing, scanning the area with a device that beeped steadily. The moment stretched on forever, and Luke couldn't tell if they were going to make it. Then, just as the agent moved closer, a distant sound cut through the tension. A crackle of static, followed by the faint screech of metal. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The Verax agent turned away, distracted by the noise, giving them the chance they needed. Now, Luke whispered urgently. He signaled for Kalia and Goran to move. They darted through the trees, low and quick, barely making a sound. The Verax agent never turned back, and the SUVs stayed where they were, unaware of their escape. They ran for what felt like miles, their hearts racing with adrenaline. But Luke knew that, for now, they had won a small victory. The real fight, however, was still ahead of them. The Verax would never stop, but they were far from done. The sun was beginning to set as Luke, Kalia, and Goran approached the old power station. The once bustling facility now stood silent, covered in ivy and dirt, hidden deep within the mountains. It was the perfect place to modify the generator and mask Kalia's presence from the Verax, if they could get it working in time. Kalia, still hidden under her cloaking device, moved silently alongside Luke and Goran. Her violet eyes glowed faintly as she scanned the area, her mind racing with the risk they were taking. The Verax were relentless, and the time they had was slipping away. Luke glanced at Goran. "Are we sure this place is secure?" he asked, his voice low. They were getting close now, and his heart was pounding with the weight of what they had to do. Goran nodded, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "It's been abandoned for years. No one should be here, but we can't be too careful." They reached the large, rusted doors of the power station. Luke stepped forward and grabbed the handle, pushing it open slowly. The creak of the old metal echoed through the silent space, sending a shiver down his spine. They slipped inside, the shadows swallowing them as they moved deeper into the building. Inside, the smell of dust and oil hung thick in the air. The walls were lined with outdated machinery, long since disconnected from the grid. In the center of the room stood the generator, covered in layers of grime but still intact. It was a relic from another time, but it was their only chance. Kalia stepped forward, her eyes scanning the generator. "This will work," she said, her voice confident despite the pressure they were under. "If we can reroute the power and create a false signature, the Verax won't be able to detect me." Luke's gaze was fixed on the machine. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. They had to move quickly, and he didn't know how much time they had before the Verax found them again. "Do you need anything from outside?" Luke asked Goran, who was already moving to the control panel. Goran shook his head. "No, we have everything we need in here. Just keep an eye on the perimeter while I work." Kalia moved to the side, keeping her senses sharp, her eyes scanning every corner of the building. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Verax were closing in once again. Luke stood by the entrance, his heart thumping in his chest. The pressure was mounting, but he couldn't afford to let fear take over. They had made it this far, and they had to see it through. Minutes turned into an hour as Goran worked to modify the generator. The silence in the building was oppressive, and every small sound seemed to echo in the vast room. Luke's mind raced, thinking of the danger that lurked just outside. They were too close to fail now. Finally, Goran stepped back from the generator, wiping his hands on his shirt. "It's done. It should work, but it won't last forever. We need to leave before the Verax catch up." Luke didn't hesitate. "Kalia, get ready. We're moving out." As they turned to leave, a loud crash echoed from the distance. The sound of vehicles breaking through the forest made Luke's stomach drop. "They're here," Kalia said, her voice tense. "We need to go. Now." Without another word they ran. But Luke knew that no matter how fast they moved, the Verax were getting closer. And soon, they would have to make a choice, fight or run. and the cost of that choice could be higher than any of them were ready for. The air was thick with tension as Luke, Kalia, and Goran sprinted toward the woods. Behind them, the sound of the Verax's SUVs crashing through the trees grew louder. They had no more time to waste. The generator was their only hope, and if it didn't work, they were out of options. Keep moving. Luke shouted, his breath coming in short gasps as he pushed himself harder, dodging branches and rocks in his path. His heart raced, knowing that the Verax were closing in fast. Kalia, still cloaked, stayed just behind him, her violet eyes scanning the forest around them. We're too exposed out here. If they get close enough, they'll see through the cloaking device. Goran, keeping pace, looked over at Luke. We need to make it to the ridge. It's our best shot. Luke nodded, his mind racing. They had to reach the ridge where they could use the generator's energy to create a more powerful shield, something that could protect them long enough to escape. If they could get there before the Verax found them, they might just make it. The sound of the SUVs grew louder, and Luke could hear the Verax agents shouting to each other, their voices filled with anger and determination. They were getting closer. We don't have much time, Kalia said, her voice tight with fear. I can feel their energy signatures. They're almost here. Luke's heart skipped a beat. They were running out of options. The ridge was just ahead, the high ground offering a chance to outmaneuver the Verax. But as they neared it, they heard the screech of tires behind them. We're not going to outrun them, Goran said, his voice grim. We'll have to fight. Luke didn't want to fight. He didn't want to risk his life, or Kalia's, in a battle they couldn't win. But there was no choice. They had come this far. They had to make it count. Get ready, Luke said, his voice steady. Kalia, activate the generator. Goran, stay on lookout. They reached the top of the ridge, and Luke could see the Verax agents approaching. The SUVs skidded to a halt, and armed soldiers began to pour out, their weapons raised and ready. This is it, Luke whispered, his body tense with adrenaline. Kalia stepped forward, her cloaking device flickering as she positioned herself in front of the generator. I'll do what I can. Get ready to move. The Verax agents shouted orders, surrounding them in seconds. Luke's heart pounded in his chest, but he couldn't let fear take over. He had come too far to back down now. As Kalia began to work on the generator, her hands moving quickly and precisely, Luke and Goran stood guard. The Verax agents inched closer, their weapons aimed, ready to strike. Suddenly, the generator hummed to life, its energy surging through the air. A powerful wave of energy exploded outward, creating a shield that shimmered in the air around them. The Verax agents froze, their sensors failing to detect the human and alien presence before them. We're safe, Kalia said, her voice filled with relief. For now. Luke breathed a sigh of relief as the Verax agents stood motionless, confused and unable to track them. They had won, this time. Luke turned to Kalia, who was still working on the device. We did it. Kalia met his gaze, her glowing violet eyes softening. Thanks to you. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Luke smiled, feeling the warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. We're in this together. We'll figure it out. As they stood there, hidden by the shield, the Verax agents began to retreat, unable to get past the barrier. Luke knew that the danger wasn't over. They had survived this battle, but the war was far from won. But for the first time, he didn't feel like he was alone in the fight. Kalia wasn't just some alien on the run anymore. She was his ally, his friend. And together, they would face whatever came next. We'll make it, Luke said, his voice filled with determination. We'll keep fighting. Kalia nodded, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. Yes, together. And with that, they turned away from the retreating Verax, knowing that the future was uncertain, but that they would face it side by side.